During these months of lockdown, we've been forced to look at ourselves. Things which have been hidden or buried away, disguised in the normality of life as we knew it, have been brought into view for many of us. The coronavirus, with the hardship, the anxiety, the grief that it brings, has disturbed at a deep level the familiar pattern of things and has made visible the fragility of life and the brokenness of humanity, things that we've always lived with, but have often been fearful to acknowledge. In this place of vulnerability and uncertainty, illusions of success that we've created as a society, the stories we've told ourselves to maintain those illusions, have been found to be lacking in the light of things which have been revealed in ways that cannot be ignored. For many, the pause in business created by the lockdown, together with the varying levels of impact the disease has had on different groups in society, has helped us to see with much greater clarity the inequalities in our society in so many different ways across gender, wealth, and race and ethnicity. The terrible event of the murder of George Floyd in the States focused this growing realisation that I think was happening for us anyway. And in the Black Lives Matter movement, we see a heart cry for justice, for equality. And that heart cry is being expressed with a new and passionate energy, fearlessly speaking truth to power. We're now all facing serious questions that we have, to a greater or lesser degree, often ignored. How do we live together as a society? How do we live together as a church? And how do we as a church live lives that reflect the good news of Jesus Christ? Are questions each one of us needs to grapple with. The answer to the questions we must have will be found in conversations with others, particularly in conversations of deep listening and learning from those who are different from oneself. But the bigger and more important thing, even than that listening, is to look deep within our own souls, to look deep down into our hearts before God. Go sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything. These wise words, spoken by Abba Moses, one of the Desert Fathers in the early church, was his advice to one of his brother monks when asked for guidance about a troubling issue. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think for some of us, lockdown has, in a sense, provided us with our own monastic selves. Here we have perhaps had to come face to face with our inner monsters. The things which negatively shape the narrative we have about ourselves, the narrative we have about other people, and these monsters have been displayed to us in a new way. We can see how they hinder our capacity to be a disciple, hinder and impair our relationships with other people. The experience of looking deep down within oneself, of sitting in your cell and allowing the solitude to teach you everything, is rarely easy, but it's absolutely essential if we're going to understand the root of our own prejudices and fears, and how we can make, if we don't face these things, each one of us can be a real part of the problem and make a negative contribution to the society around us. In 2017, the Archbishops commissioned me to chair the Church of England's Pastoral Advisory Group. The group was formed to advise local churches on pastoral guidance in relation to LGBTI+ people in the context of the Church's current teaching. We had to acknowledge the sad reality that LGBTI plus people do not always experience the unconditional love of Christ in the church. Very often they experience quite the opposite. And one of the outcomes from the work we did in the group was these pastoral principles for living well together. At the end of the video, there is a link to show you how you can find out more about them. The pastoral principles for living well together help us to explore our monsters. They're called Pervading Evils. And here they are. The pervading evils of prejudice, silence, ignorance, fear, hypocrisy, abuse of power, which hinder our relationships and destroy community and impair our relationship with God. The focus of the resource is on LGBTI plus issues, but these pastoral principles for living well together and owning the 6 pervading evils in our own life apply to all kinds of areas where difference is seen as a problem and not a gift. And they can be used very effectively to explore, for example, the racism that is now being so exposed in our society, in the church, in our institutions. All of these deeper issues within society are symptoms of a deeper problem found in the hearts of its people. The thing that I've come to realise most profoundly is that before we start to identify the problem that other people have, before we start to identify the speck of sawdust in our brother or sister's eye, we have to have the courage to see the plank in our own eye. We have to look inside ourselves. Effective change is the only change we can really be sure of effecting, is change within ourselves. We can change ourselves. We can, in the mercy of God, seek to become more conformed to the likeness of Christ. We can do this, but only for ourselves. We ignore ourselves, we certainly can't start to just criticise and demonise other people. It's in this context that God is calling each one of us to work towards being a part of the body of Christ, showing reconciliation, hope, and light. So let's be encouraged as in faith we journey together in our deepening discipleship, each one of us giving permission and courage to one another to look within ourselves, because it's not an easy thing to do. Let us value one another, enjoy the journey, and let us go into the cell of our own hearts to hear the transformative message of God's love for ourselves. And when we're able to do that, it is then that we can, with authenticity, share God's love with a broken and fearful world. Amen.